My name is Scott Urbis, and I'm going to be leading off the presentation today. Here I have with me Don Lee, who is a senior consultant with us, as well as Adrian Crowfoot. And today we're going to be having a discussion on working together with OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge Designer, ProjectWise, and iTwin integration. Next slide, please. So the whole purpose of this particular presentation was I was putting together some things for the conference, working on some data sets and things for training and just for some presentations. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to put together a sample highway project and get a bunch of our colleagues together and help us develop a data set that was connected to some of our other applications. So the whole purpose of this is to share a sample highway project that several of the Bentley colleagues have been developing for the conference. And we also wanted to discuss how we could integrate some of our other solutions like ProjectWise, OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge Designer, Synchro, and iTwin technology. Now, why did we want to do this? Why this particular topic? A couple months ago, I was talking to a longtime user of ours, and he had mentioned to me that sometimes users are confused about how some of our applications are supposed to be connected and integrated and how they're actually supposed to work together. So when I started putting together the data set, it became pretty clear that maybe this was an opportunity for us or our team to showcase how some of these things can be connected. I also wanted to create a data set that we could also use for most of the conference presentations as well, and some of the future training courses. So next slide. So our topics for today are just going to be the project details, the data set that we started with, talk a little bit about what we developed, what we built, who worked on it, that kind of thing. And then we're going to get into our project considerations and then the project common data environment. So I'm going to start off by just talking about the project details, and then Don's going to come in later, talk about some project considerations, and Adrian's going to finish up with some other things. So here is a sample project that we started developing. And this is I-95. And what we did is, this is just a sample. It's not a real design. We set it up as a widening and resurfacing. So we're going to do a partial reconstruction of Interstate 95. We were going to do reconstruction of the ramps as well as reconstruction of State Route 97. So again, keep in mind, this is just for training and demo purposes only. It's not something that's currently being built or anything like that. So I just want everyone to be aware. So next slide, please. So here's kind of the typical section layout of this particular roadway. You can see over here on my southbound lanes, we have some overlay and resurfacing. We also have some new construction going on in the median there, where we're widening to the middle, putting in a barrier, and then over on the northbound lanes, we're doing all brand new construction. So that was kind of like the basis for the 3D model and the design of the roadway going into this. So next slide. So here's kind of what it looks like. When we first started out, modeling the roads pretty straightforward. You can just do all this in OpenRoads. You don't need ProjectWise or any of that other stuff to start off with. But initially, we started off and we did a lot of the modeling just on the desktop, on my laptop. And then I was talking to some of my other colleagues here, Don and Adrian. We had a discussion. We said, hey, let's put this in ProjectWise and let's see if we can connect this up to some of our other applications. So that's what we did. So we took this particular 3D model, we set it up inside of ProjectWise, and we started work. And then I started recruiting some other colleagues to do some other areas of modeling and design, like the bridges and the drainage and utilities, and the iTwin and reality model and all that kind of stuff. And what we discovered is, once we dug into this, is talking to some of our reality model colleagues, was that we had a brand new reality model of this particular area. So we were able to integrate that into the project as well and take a look at the current conditions. And you can see here, this is a pretty high definition looking reality model. It's almost picture quality from what we found. And this was pretty interesting to find, because we did have a reality model that was flown and created somewhere back in 2016 or 2017. And we were kind of surprised that we had some new data available to us to use and showcase on the project. So next slide. Then once we built the model and we got all that up and running, is all set up at ProjectWise and everything. We're able to leverage that over into the digital twin environment. And you can see here in this particular picture, we're able to get it into the digital twin or the iTwin, create a nice eye model, and start doing some other things with it. So next slide, please. So here's another picture of the iTwin. We're looking at some item types here. So when you make an item or when you create an iTwin or iModel, we can pick information off that civil data fairly easily. So next slide. So when we started putting this together, as I mentioned, you've kind of formed a project team, and it's kind of started first with Don and Adrian. I went to them and I said, hey, you guys know a lot about ProjectWise. What's going to take to get this thing inside of ProjectWise? So talked to them. We got some things set up, and then I continued my roadway modeling process, did all the ramps and intersections and everything else you see in there. And I talked to Steve Willoughby on the bridge team, and he was nice enough to make some nice bridges for us, and we got those bridges integrated in there. Then we went along and talked to James and Jordan. They got some drainage and utility information set up for us. And we talked to Dan Ahern, because he's the expert on item types. So he has taken a look at getting the item types working for us in the model. We were also talking a little bit with Joe Yanin about the iTwin and some things that we could do there. And finally, we roped in Dan Sheldon from the Synchro side to do a lot of the construction modeling. And one of the things I want to point out here is that, all these folks that helped work on the project, they are using the same data in some of the presentations that you'll see later in the week during the conference. So next slide here. So I just want to highlight some of those sessions here. So tomorrow, Don's going to be presenting some plans production stuff at Tuesday morning. And then Steve Willoughby is going to be showing some OpenBridge plans production tools there. And Dan Ahern's going to be covering the item type stuff using the same project data. And we're also going to take this conversation a step further on Wednesday with Ian and Joey Llewellyn talking about digital twins and civil workflows with digital twins. And then Jordan is going to talk about utilities on transportation projects on Wednesday, utilizing the same project data. And then Dan Sheldon is going to wrap it up on Wednesday as well, using the same project data and how it got integrated with Synchro. So just some things to consider there of everything that you're seeing today. You're going to see this project showcased in a few different presentations throughout the week, and think about how you can get it integrated into your civil projects. So now I'm going to turn it over to Don, and he's going to take it from here.
Thanks, Scott. You hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, welcome, guys. So as Scott laid out kind of a little bit of the history here, this was an interesting endeavor. As we were planning the material for the conference, we wanted to align with more of a real-world approach of doing things, making sure that we integrate a variety of different systems and solutions to achieve, the result here of this, reconstruction of this interchange here. So with that, there were some project considerations that we wanted to take into account, because ultimately we wanted to plan this out right and make sure we understood all the different aspects like we would on a traditional highway project. So of course, a few things we wanted to be aware of. Number one, the scope and the schedule. The scope of what needed to be done, well, that was quite easy. It's whatever Scott told us needed to be done in this particular instance. But the schedule was, I would say, equally as easy. It was the event itself. So we knew what our deadline was, and we had to make it. So we were able to understand those first key elements, but it got a little bit more complicated from there. Afterwards, we had to ask ourselves, well, who are really the stakeholders in this journey? So we had to make sure that we understood and set up actual roles. Who is the owner-operator for this project, and how are they going to play into understanding this? Who are the designers? The design teams, if you will. This could be a couple of different organizations that are working together and need to serve for different parts of the project, right? So we could have maybe a bridge company that's actually working in conjunction with the firm that's doing the highway design, but we could also have somebody else that's working on the utilities as well as a survey outfit, mind you, that's capturing some of the existing conditions. In addition to this, we always talk about creating content, but more and more you'll hear us talk about leveraging our digital twins and reviewing these models. So we wanted to ensure that we actually had a team that was assigned as the reviewers, and Joey and Ian are going to serve that purpose, all the while internally we're also reviewing our own content. And then the contractors themselves, well, that's where Dan Sheldon's going to wear that helmet, that hat, if you will, and he's going to play the role as the contractor and carry this forward. So those were challenging, but not impossible to kind of establish, and we were going to, certainly make sure that we had the appropriate rights established for those roles so people could access things appropriately, not just a fully wide open system for everyone. Now, in addition to this, the standards, and when we say standards, this a lot of times comes up, and most people think in our industry, highway standards, what the requirements are for the safety of the design of the roadway, or perhaps maybe the CAD standards. What color, what level, what feature definition should that be on? Well, we wanted to break it up into some more building blocks, if you will, or requirements around this project and actually challenge what it takes to do a project. And many of you probably have a lot of experience with this, but we wanted to appreciate the efforts you put in and do the same ourselves. So we wanted to establish standards around the documents, how files are named, what systems are we going to use that could support something that's a bit more unified for everybody to understand, not just a regional requirement, but maybe an international one. In addition to that, if we could take that and complement it by establishing workflows and processes around that as well, something that's recognized in our industry, we wanted to appreciate those as well into this project. And then last but not least are the solutions. What are the tools that we're going to be using on this particular project? So next slide, Adrian. So on our project, we also wanted to identify these stages. And I think many of us are familiar with, planning and designing, construct, operate, and maintaining as kind of that life cycle, if you will. But we wanted to focus on just a few key elements. So can you mouse click once there, sir? Thank you. So our focus for this event is on the planning, the design, and the construction aspect of this. Now, that's not to say we couldn't carry it forward into the future, but we felt, given the event was for roads and bridges, that we were going to stay up in the front portion of the project life cycle here. Next slide, please. So on with those standards. Well, one of the things we wanted to understand and appreciate is that since we've decided we were going to use ProjectWise to help us kind of manage all this content, allow it to coalesce and be the vehicle for ultimately digital delivery, we wanted to establish those standards for the design files themselves. And in this instance, we used a ProjectWise managed workspace. For those that are unaware, it just establishes some governance on our standards. It's making sure that symbologies are being adhered to across the design team. And we did leverage the dynamic configurations, which for some of you, you may be unfamiliar with. That's a new methodology to simplify the way we can handle those workspaces within ProjectWise. Now, ultimately, applying this is going to cover all stakeholders. So once we set those standards across the project, everybody is going to be managed under that environment, thus the name. And it's going to support not only the solutions themselves, but we can even take it into the individual versions. So if we had kind of different product versions, we would be able to manage those in accordance to this environment. And of course, we've organized our standards in this project by the client and their releases. So, we are a state DOT standard in this instance for 2022, and we kind of have a breakdown structure using the Bentley best practice there to host our workspace. And ultimately, it keeps everyone consistent. So that's the sole purpose for our design standards at this step of the process here. So next slide, please. Now, the other portion where we talk about the workflows, the processes, and the documents, well, this is where we get into introducing ISO 19650. Now, I know when I was first introduced to it a few years ago, I kept hearing this being said in our meetings, and I had to do some discovery myself, but it's essentially an international set of standards, and it's really to support your building information modeling. It's a very intricate series of workflows and processes that are going to manage good document naming, understanding what's a work in progress, understanding what's approved. So it's a very well-tuned system to maintain kind of a general consensus on what is the most up-to-date documents and which ones have been denied. And ultimately, ProjectWise is going to manage ISO 19650 for us, as you'll see. So it's definitely, as Adrian's highlighting there, the full life cycle of a built asset. So that's kind of the key piece of information that has a high level of value there. So we definitely wanted to introduce something that is it's being used internationally, and hopefully in the States it's also going to pick up and gain a little bit more adoption. Next slide, please, if you could. So on to the solutions. And I think it goes without saying, ProjectWise is the foundation for this entire experience. So ProjectWise was the primary solution that we agreed upon for the document management side of this endeavor. But of course, the other major players in this are OpenCity's Planner, OpenRoads Designer, OpenBridge, as well as Synchro. Now, on ProjectWise, a few things we want to point out is that we are, in fact, leveraging the iTwin technology as part of this journey, but we're also introducing context share. So Scott showed in his earlier slide some of the reality modeling, and that was introduced via context share directly into the DGN environment by way of ProjectWise. So these are the major players within our task here, or our project, if you will, for the event. And so next slide, please, Adrian. Then we wanted to understand, where do these all fit? How do they all fit together? And this gets asked a lot. So of course, ProjectWise is where we're managing and maintaining our documents. This is things like OpenBridge as well as OpenRoads. The typical designer is going to be accessing the ProjectWise environment, and by way of that, we're going to be able to generate iTwin. Now, in addition to that, iTwin technology, building our iModels so that we actually have a model that everybody can agree upon as the design, we wanted to also leverage Synchro for the construction side of things. Now, interestingly enough, all of this content can also then be accessed under OpenCity's Planner. So we wanted to make sure that we had this environment, if you will, this established concept of a project as a front stage, if you will, to access all of these different solutions. Next slide, please, Adrian. And so as we looked about ProjectWise, we asked, well, what are all the different tools within ProjectWise from more of a pedestrian view? And as we look at ProjectWise, it's a collaborative environment, but it's comprised of a few things. And the few things that we wanted to focus on were the design integration server, as well as ProjectWise 365. And the purpose of this was to deliver iTwin from ProjectWise 365. We were going to schedule things through this so that as Bentley as a team are working on this project, we would have a scheduled event that would deliver an iTwin for us all to work around. Next slide, sir. And so once we went ahead and did that, we also recognized there's a few different solutions that fit underneath, the ProjectWise environment. First of which is ProjectWise 365. We hear a lot about ProjectWise 365 as well as ProjectWise Drive. And so we wanted to understand some of the capabilities of those, but I also wanted to understand areas where it was more meaningful to be in ProjectWise 365 or to be in ProjectWise. And the ones that I just want to point out right out front here, we've made bold. And Adrian, can you mouse click once for me, sir? And that is ProjectWise Design Integration. While we're working in that environment, it's really for the designer. This is going to give us access to all of the content, the managed workspace, and ensure that we've got access to everything that we have under the ProjectWise arsenal. Now, that may be a little bit too much for some. So in most cases, project managers and some of the reviewers, as well as just general users, they have a choice. They can go to either, but I think it's key to mention that from a design standpoint, we were using ProjectWise Explorer, we were using ProjectWise Design Integration, and it's mainly because we're leveraging the managed workspace within that environment. So ProjectWise 365 otherwise is a nice front stage that allowed our project managers, our reviewers, and just some light document access. It gave them a nice front stage to be able to review, look at issue tracking, things of that nature. Now, with regards to the workflow, we had to think about this one as well. Where does everything fit in the timeline? And as you can see here, I wanted to focus first and foremost on the design. Scott had some files. We wanted to put them into ProjectWise, and we wanted to understand the different roles. Now, on the survey right-of-way side, a few of us were involved, and we were using OpenRoads at that point in time. But as we started to break up this project into different tasks, we then introduced a design segment. And the design task included our bridged users as well as our OpenRoads users. Now, all of this is underneath the ProjectWise environment, under ProjectWise Design Integration. But then as we introduced the construction aspect, well, there's a little bit of an overlap here. So as we brought Dan Sheldon onto the team, he introduced Synchro. He had a ProjectWise construction task, but Synchro, of course, spills over into the Synchro control and allows us the ability to do some 4D scheduling, things along those lines. Now, all the while this was occurring, we wanted to kind of bring some of that data back into OpenCity's planner. So as we're looking at users that maybe aren't so design heavy, they're just kind of looking, understanding what's going on the project. We wanted to feed things back from a planning perspective. And it's important to note we did bring some right-of-way data back and forth between both design and planning. But all the while during this journey, it was ProjectWise that assisted us in scheduling the ability to create iModels using the iTwin technology, and we can push on from design through to construction and manage that iTwin. Next slide, please. So just a few takes. I wanted to give you a quick preview of each of these, just so you can see what the end results were. So can you play that for me there, Adrian? Should be at the bottom, sir. Doesn't look like you're getting the play bar there.
You want to share your screen real quick?
Thank you.
You can go through these.
Here, I'll go ahead and... You got it?
You can share your screen there.
All right, gotcha. Okay, very good. So let me pull up my screen here, and we'll go ahead and share with you our different environments. Thank you. So let's screen share. Everyone let me know when you see my screen. Very good. Okay, so we started with OpenCity's planner, and very simply put, we created a project startup screen. So this afforded us the ability to allow all of the different data sources to kind of coalesce in one place. We have different stakeholders with different capabilities. Some could be public users, some could be internal designers, and there's content we don't want to share yet. So we introduced a startup screen, and as you can see here, we've got access to our design portal. Since this was a heavy construction project, or reconstruction, if you will, We wanted to be able to have access to ProjectWise Design Integration and ProjectWise 365. But in addition to that, we wanted to also be able to leverage OpenCities Planner for the purpose of understanding some of the right-of-way impacts that we may have on this. So we wanted to pull up a lot of the parcel information. On a click of one of the tiles, we can see we're brought into the OpenCities Planner environment, where the left side we had access to our ability to move around the environment, zoom in and out, as well as maybe even tilt and rotate this environment. Of course, over on the right-hand side, we have controls, things like our startup button, which brought us back to the point of origin, showcasing the limits of the project, if you will. We have the ability to show labels as well as parcels. And my parcels happen in this instance to be on, but I need to change a little bit with the map. So we were able to leverage the transparency tools to kind of dial it back a little bit so we could in fact pull up that parcel data. Now, this information is being mapped to OpenCities Planner. And so these are actually parcels I can click on, and the data, the model source in this case was a shapefile. So we were able to pull in all the shapefile information and understand details about the particular properties and parcels that we would be impacting perhaps on this project. Now from this, we can also go and close back out and go right back out to the main stage. And so from the startup screen, once we click our design portal, we're taken out to our ProjectWise 365 environment. Now this environment, this is a nice dashboard environment for me to understand what my work inbox was like, where I was running late on something, and what I was assigned to do, as well as some of the design review itself. And as we can see down the list of tiles, if I were to come down to our documents, we can see that we're actually tying to ProjectWise Design Integration. Adrian will describe more of that coming up. But in addition to this, we actually had access as well to some design review elements, issue tracking, deliverables management, and insights. So if we take a look, here's the breakdown structure of ProjectWise Design Integration and some of the files we were working with. For example, this iTwin file we're using to collect and prepare for the iTwin model. In addition to this, we had access directly to that iTwin and design review environment. So here we can see the model via ProjectWise 365. And then lastly, on this one, we also wanted to leverage the insights of this project. Who's worked on it the most? How much is done? We wanted to be able to leverage the dashboarding from more of a manager standpoint to understand that by having a connected data environment, we can actually do more. And then from that standpoint, once we had our iTwin and once we understood where we were going with things, we leveraged Synchro to actually capture that digital twin as well and then schedule it. So here I have a favorite for our I-95 project, and I was able to actually come in, access my single control page, and here we can see my 4D model that Dan Sheldon was so gracious to put together for us. And from that, I'm able to understand and review the scheduling on the project. So here we have the bridge in this instance scheduled, and we can see and we can actually go through the slider to understand the order at which things were going to be constructed in and scheduled accordingly. So this is a little bit of what we put together for the conference this week. I'm going to now hand it off to Adrian, who's going to take us down a little bit deeper and explain some of the things that we had to consider even further to get this, make this possible.
Thanks, Dan. Don. All right, so once I had all the project details and considerations, there was a few more requirements just to kind of sum things up. The project team, they wanted to provide entry points for different personas. They wanted to utilize the reality data in the project area. They needed to deliver a project information model to the DOT. And then they wanted to present the project status to the project manager. So Don has shown some of those elements already, but I'm going to just show you kind of the steps that I went through to set these things up. From a data management point of view. So really it was basically three major steps. The first thing is I gathered all the resources and reference material, and then I created the framework for the project information model, and then I implemented the role-based entry points. What Don has already shown you, kind of backtrack a little bit and see how that was set up. So as we've been discussing, we had three major task groups. We had the right-of-way and survey, the design, and the construction. And that whole piece is the project delivery phase of the whole asset lifecycle. The core data of the system includes references and resources and documents and design models. And as Don was saying, that core data is stored in ProjectWise design integration in a data source or in context share. So we had both of those things together to make one common data environment. The project information model, it ties together the appropriate reality data, GIS data, and design models to provide, whoops, I went too far there, to provide review for each major task. And so the project model is used for different purposes, such as parcel identification, design review, and construction planning and quantity takeoffs. And you kind of saw a little bit of that in Don's earlier slide, or his live demo or whatever. So, and finally, the information is presented to different personas in a way that makes sense for them to use. For some examples include MS Teams, dashboards, iModel Review, ProjectWise Explorer. Just depending on the person, we actually have different needs to get. Are you guys having trouble hearing me? It sounds like it's set. I'll get a little closer to the mic. Is that better?
Yeah, get a little closer, please.
Okay. Make sure I'm using the right one here. There. So in ProjectWise, we had one main work area that houses the three sub-work areas that represent each major task. And then these task groups are then related to the corresponding ProjectWise 365 or construction project. So we actually had two ProjectWise 365 projects, one construction project that represented each of the work areas underneath the main one. We had three main data sets for reference. We had the reality mesh from Context Share, county parcels from the county's GIS system, and then the civil workspace from the DOT. The reality data was built by flying a UAV to take photos and then using context capture to process the aerial photos into a reality mesh. I think we saw that a little bit earlier, but this is the viewer for the reality mesh, and you can see it's pretty fine detail. And then we'll zoom into the project. You can see that the reality mesh is actually larger than the project area. We described the part that we needed. And then the next thing is I brought in the parcels from the county data into the common data environment using 4 products and services. I used ProjectWise Design Integration, OpenCities Map, Design Review, and OpenCities Planner. First, the county parcels were downloaded and placed into the right-of-way and survey work area. Next, I labeled the parcels in OpenCities Map. Third, I created a right-of-way project iModel and added the text from my OpenCities Map design file and the parcel information from the county shapefile. So I'll show you the different views. There's a text that I brought in the design file. And then I'll switch over to view here and I'll show you the parcel data that came in from the shape files. And finally, I published a map with OpenCities Planner using the iModel that I created in the right-of-way project. So I turned on the parcel information, and then I also have the parcel information in the shape, and I had the text on there as well. So now I have a way of showing the project team in the iModel And I also have a way to show the public in the right-of-way map or in the parcel map. The DOT workspace files were then downloaded and imported into the ProjectWise data source. And then the standards were then integrated into the Bentley design apps easy to manage workspace. And Don had kind of talked about this earlier, but that's how kind of the setup is done. It's really fairly basic. Once the harness is set up, that dynamic configuration, it's pretty easy to pop in a new workspace and then introduce those standards into specific projects. A project information model is simply just a digital representation of one or more assets during the project delivery phase of the overall asset lifecycle. The project information model may be presented in different manners depending on the purpose of the model. To create a project information model, individual model containers that represent project components will be collected and rendered into an iModel that can be accessed by the appropriate project stakeholders. For our project, we have project information model presented in 3 ways. One shows the parcel maps, the next is for design review, and the last one is for construction review and scheduling. So all 3, as you saw before, use the same information, the same data to build. We're just presenting the information in different ways. But at the end of the project, asset information needed for the stakeholder will be presented as a final project information model, and they'll take that and put it into their asset management system to update the asset. You will see the project design model and project construction model in action in the other presentations during the conference. For this project, we embraced the ISO 19650 industry standard approach to deliver a project information model during project delivery. And to break it down really simply, the ISO 19650 methodology consists of 2 key principles. The first one is to break up project into information containers, and the second one is to work each information container through a QA/QC process. Information containers are broken out using predefined schema consisting of organization, system, location, role, and document type. The role definitions and the document type definitions, they're already specified in ISO 19650 documentation. There's just a few examples on the screen there, and those are most of the ones that we used for this project. However, the organization, systems, and locations needed to be defined for the project itself. So in this project, we had 4 organizations. We had My Company, ABC Contractors, Bridge the Gap Design Group, and State DOT. They're fictional organizations, but the My Company did most of the work for design. ABC Contractors was Dan Sheldon. He did the construction. And Bridge the Gap Design Group were the structural engineers. And then I suspect that Ian and Dan were the State DOT that were reviewing the project. We had 6 systems, or actually 4 systems, if I can count correctly there. But we had the roads, utilities, stormwater system, and bridges. And then for the bridges and roads, we had unique locations within those systems. So we had State Road 97 and Interstate 95, all 4 ramps, and then a couple crossroads or cross streets that were part of the project as well. Now, the workflow is basically kind of a work in progress, and then we had a shared state where the internal discipline was reviewing their own work, and then we'd have a approved state where the construction would kind of use it. So we kind of loosely modeled this during the program or for the project. So the design team, the idea is that the design team will complete the design and review each container in the work in progress state. And then the main two roles for the updating the project information model are the discipline or design and construction lead. So once the discipline approves the container, it will be in the pending approval state, and this would be the shared state. At this point, the BIM manager or discipline lead would attach the container or model to the discipline's composite model. The composite model will then update the project information model on the next scheduled run. And this is what Tom was talking about in our scheduling in the ProjectWise 365 services. Once the whole design team determines that the container is approved for construction, then the lead project manager or BIM manager shall approve the container, and then it'll be put into the construction composite model, and then eventually published into the construction project information model. Now, kind of how that works is that the creator would create the document. When created, the creator adds an appropriate title and a revision note. The person that finishes the design selects their initials in the design by and drawn by dropdowns. At this point, the designer should have a peer review the source file and make any necessary changes or comments. Once the peer-to-peer review is complete, their checker shall select their initials in the check by dropdown. And then the discipline lead will approve the work in the progress document and answer yes to the prompt. The document will then go into the pending approval state, and the submitted by will be populated. The pending approval state signifies that the design is ready to share for other disciplines to review in the project digital information model. Then the BIM manager or discipline shall now attach the model. We already did that, but that's kind of how the system would work, and then it would be approved as well. Now, as Don alluded to, we had several project roles. We had the different task teams. We also had a few different personas. And I'm just going to review how you would go in for each role, how that would work. So for the project manager, they could actually use Teams in our case. And there we go. So you can see here, they could access the documents from the ProjectWise 365 project right in here. And then they could also go to the design review or the document reviews to review any PDFs. They didn't have any in this case quite yet. We weren't to the sheets quite yet. But then you can also do your designer review right in here. And then you can also get into your design insights, all from within Microsoft Teams, because we have the ProjectWise 365 application running inside Teams. And so you can look at the different dashboards here. And this is all because we're driving the documents with actual metadata with those document codes and with all of the attributes that I showed you on the previous slide. Now, as far as the project designer, as we were talking about, since they're doing CAD design, they're going to use ProjectWise Explorer to come in and open up the documents, the CAD files, and the appropriate workspace would load up with the application, with the appropriate application too. And then finally, we have the construction point of view, where they come in through the construction portal inside of the web browser, and they can do all of their quantity takeoffs, scheduling, costs, all that information. And Dan Sheldon will expand upon that whole idea in his presentation. So just to wrap things up, we've shown you the project details, how we then had to have some considerations for the project, and then we ultimately built this common data environment to support the entire project team.